Greetings and hello, Kaiser Philip V. Somebody once told me that you cannot call anger evil until you've seen what it produces. And I was told this at a time when I was a very angry person. Uh, you know, uh, I didn't grow up so nice, and even after I was, adopted by my other family, and I was taken out of that environment, uh, I still had to deal with it a lot, and I was still really angry. And kids are cruel. I was I was way fatter than I am right now in like uh, middle school, high school, um, and of course, tubby, things like that were tossed around. And I was actually in one of the rougher schools I ever attended. I was actually People actually tried to beat me up a lot, and I mean that didn't work out so well for them. But I mean, it still was something that really angered me. And the principals and administration was about as useful as tits on a bull with the whole situation. So I never um, I was just an angry person. And I thought about this, and it was a quote that I've kind of kept with me down through my life. And you know they say you should never let the sun set on your anger. um, and I think one of the reasons for that is because you know passion is a very important energy that you can channel into something productive. um, so I guess that's why I'm making this right now, when I actually have other things I should probably be doing. Looking around my residence right now. But you know, I think this is important. Um, there's been a lot of fuss recently about uh, the state of Indiana passing some bill which apparently allows for business owners to refuse services to certain groups of people. And of course, there's been a huge emotional to do about this. And there's been, a big lot of talk about uh, comparing it to segregation, and I've heard people say it's not. I've heard American conservatives and Republicans say to me really controversial things, really inflammatory things, like discrimination is not a bad word. Um, I guess except when it applies to them. Um, and I've heard lots of conservative pundits saying gay totalitarianism. Uh, the proponents of or the beginning of gay fascism, which is this idea that homosexuals are forcing people to accept their lifestyle, like even non-political entities who may have not had an opinion or acted in the political sphere one way or the other. People who were not politicians, who were not senators, who were not congressmen, who were not lobbyists in any way, shape, or form, and people who really had no clout in the system than anyone else, no more clout in the system than anyone else, but are being forced to go along with a party line for a political party they might not even affiliate with. They may not even affiliate with the opposition. And I will admit that bothers me quite a bit. And I experienced something similar recently. I posted on my private Facebook. I said, you know, if because I was inspired because I don't like Waleed Shoebat. I mean, I think a lot of stuff is sensationalist. I think a lot of it's not really well founded. And I despise yellow journalism of any sort. I believe news should be uh, to the point, forceful but to the point, factual, and other things. I don't think it should be emotionalist, sensationalist, uh, propagandized garbage. I think if you're going to report the news, you need to tell people what they need to know to make informed decisions. You shouldn't tell them what decision to make on the subject. Um, and at least if you're going to give the illusion, at least, of a free republic. And you know, I said that. I said that. Um, I said it was based on the idea that Wally Sheep had apparently called several bakeries, and they were gay bakeries, run by, I don't know how you know it's a gay bakery. I mean, I've never seen a gay bakery. I mean, maybe it was run by people who were avidly homosexual. I mean, maybe they had, like, support gay marriage stickers on their business windows. I mean, I've walked into small businesses before that had, election signs up and things like that. So that's the only way I could figure you would know it was a gay bakery. Uh, so, he called and asked them to make a cake that said support traditional marriage, as opposed to one that said support gay marriage, like the kind that's been asked to have been baked for gay weddings in the past and other things that caused legal controversy. And they were very rude to them. They recorded the calls, they recorded the responses. Now, I mean, they could be absolutely 100% fabricating every inch of it, but I mean, it was believable to me, that people would act this way, and because we live in an age when politics are not civil, there is no discourse. It's all oppositional, it's all confrontational, with no clear goal or end in sight except the destruction of the other party. While people who actually have political clout are making all the decisions for you. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but if I'm going to live in a dictatorship, I'd like my government to be honest that I live in a dictatorship, so I understand where my place is, and I can live my life, instead of this illusion of choice that we're given, that we have any say in the political process. I mean, I don't like dictatorships, but honestly, if I lived in one, I would like to know. I don't want it to be hidden from me. And I decided, I thought, well, if I shouldn't be able to, if I don't want to walk into a gay bakery and ask them to make a cake that supports traditional marriage, well, then don't go into a Christian bakery and ask them to make a cake that supports gay marriage. And someone pointed something out that, here's the thing, for Catholics, marriage is a sacrament. I mean, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, during the Napoleonic period, one of the big axes that Catholics had to grind with Napoleon was civil marriage. They didn't like the idea of taking, authority with marriage away from the civilian and away from the church sector, from the religious sector. They thought it should be a civilian and religious issue, and particularly with Catholic marriage, because for Catholicism, marriage is not just a contract. For Catholics, marriage is one of the 7 sacraments in their religion. It's one of the, I guess you could say in layman's terms, the sacred rites of their faith. It's not just a fancy ceremony. It's sacred. It's holy. And a marriage can only be the sacrament of matrimony can only be performed, with one man and one consenting man and one consenting woman. And there's a lot of different, it's been like this for a while, but there's a lot of different variables that go into, like, what accepts it. But baseline, it has to be between a consenting male and a consenting female. Well, for Catholics, to mess around with a sacrament deliberately is sacrilege. It's not something you should. And sacrilege is a mortal sin, and you cannot aid. You cannot aid in a mortal sin. You can't do it. So the problem, therein lies in that, even if it's not necessarily a Catholic marriage, it's not necessarily a sacrament, sodomy is still also a sin, and you can't aid and abet someone in sin. If you lead someone to sin, it's better for you to have a millstone put around your neck and to be cast into the sea. So it represents a moral conscience problem for Catholics who may or may not have had a real interest in the political sphere and just wanted to be left alone to follow their religion. You understand me? And Christians too also have this problem. I don't think I'm pretty sure Muslims, don't feel comfortable with the idea of gay marriage. Not even, radicals, just general Muslims don't feel comfortable about the idea of homosexuality because it's against their religion. There's lots of other religions for whom things like that are taboo. Um, I was told Buddhism has this thing about homosexuality by a Buddhist. Someone on Facebook claimed to be a Buddhist. So, I mean, apparently, there's people who are uncomfortable with the idea. Um, and it's not necessarily just out of ill will towards the parties involved. They personally don't want anything to do with it. It's like, you want to get married, great, fine. I don't want to be involved though. I don't want my name on it. It's that kind of a thing. And I think you shouldn't be forced to incriminate yourself. I don't think you should be forced to involve yourself in something you don't want to get involved in. And basically that's the point I made on my Facebook. I said I wouldn't walk into a gay bakery, and ask these people to make a cake that said support traditional marriage. And I don't think you should walk into a Christian bakery and ask them to make you a cake that says support gay marriage. And there's this person on there who I had recently become friends with while I was, looking for a math tutor, and she, disagreed, but I don't remember the full context of the discussion. Basically, she disagreed, and I said, listen, I mean, I've told people this before, listen, I don't care if Joseph Ratzinger, said that we can't be okay with gay civil marriage either. I personally think that whatever the state wants to do with civil marriage, they can bloody well do it. I mean, it's not a sacrament, it's not a holy thing, I don't think we need to treat civil marriage like it's this crucial component of our doctrine when less than 200 years ago we were totally opposed to the idea of of civil marriage in the person of the Napoleonic Code. I think that's just really historically illiterate for Catholics to be in an uproar about gay marriage in terms of what the state wants to do with their civil marriage and what is a civil marriage. I think that shows a lot of hair trigger reactionism and a whole lot of freaking out about this kind of thing, when really it's not our problem. It's not our business. And that's what I basically said. But she said, but why wouldn't you want to get involved with it? And I was about to respond, and this guy I know on there, who is a real sedevacantist, like he's pretty out there. I mean, but he's not Brother Peter Diamond, UFOs are Satan out there. So he posts and he says lots of really inflammatory stuff. I mean, I get the point he's trying to make. He's throwing out moral dogma, like in moral doctrines, homosexuality is a disorder, yada yada yada, it's disgusting, and okay, but see, there's several problems with that kind of an approach. Number one, the person I'm talking to is not Catholic; they're an atheist. Now, just because you don't believe in gravity doesn't make it true, but at the same time, Catholicism is a voluntary religion. It's a religion that you voluntarily join, I mean, there were incidences in the early days of Christendom of forced baptism as a requirement for citizenship, but that had lots of roots in the fact that paganism was directly aggressive towards and subversive to, newly emerging and newly converted Christian governments. I mean, just because one section of pagan France decided they were going to become Christian didn't mean their neighbors did. So, I mean, that explains that rather simply. And so when part of the whole reason for fighting against Christians becomes they worship strange gods, they worship foreign gods, when that becomes a basis of your opposition, you have to target that and you have to cripple it, which is why, you have things like the Scandinavian war bishops tearing down statues of Svantevate, because it was part of the whole thing. Like, those idols were representative of the reasons why these people were fighting. So, for the, the barbarian world, to tear down gods, these idols, these idols were gods. Like, there's been debate over whether or not, the idols were channels for the representation of the deity, or whether or not the idols were considered actual gods. Most historical texts seem to treat most idols as if they were actually gods. And not just house idols, but like, idols in major temples. That's how they seem to be mostly treated. I've heard different things from various pagans on the subject. People who specialize in, the history of pagan cultures, but generally speaking, the idols are recognized as gods. So, there's that. So, but when you're interfacing, in just a conversion type setting, you're not going to convince someone who doesn't even believe in God in the first place that the moral dictates of a God they don't believe in, whether or not he's real, that they don't believe in, is a threat, okay? Like, all right, I'm going to put this simply to you, all right? Okay, so if you're trying to convince someone why something is a bad idea, like, I don't know, say your buddy wants to try riding a unicycle, and he's like, he's like 12 Jaeger bombs in, right? Okay, so he's deciding he's going to go ride a unicycle. Like, you're not saying, you don't hate the guy. You're just trying to explain to him, listen, buddy, you shouldn't do this. And you're trying to reason with him, and you got to say, listen, you're hammered off your ass. You can't ride a unicycle to start with, and I really don't feel like taking you to the hospital because you cracked your head open. It's that kind of a thing, you have to convince someone why something is a bad idea in the first place. Very few people are just going to take your word for it. Everyone's got a little Missouri in them. You got to show them why something's a bad idea. So, totally, I mean, I just basically, I deleted his comments. She did see them, I deleted the comments, because they were not helpful to the discussion. I just told him, listen, like, you're going about this the wrong way. Just hold off, all right? I got this. I told her to just sit it out, and she responded. I just said, look, okay, I deleted the comments. I'm not supporting that approach. Just, chill out. I got this. And she verbally, clearly thanked me for doing that, and we just continued the discussion. And I just was saying, look, I mean, it's not an issue of disliking gays. It's the fact that, like I said, some of these people don't have a stake or clout in the Republican or conservative party. They're just people, John Adams said, in relation to the American Revolution, 1/3 of the colonies was rebel, 1/3 of the colonies was Tory, and another third didn't give a shit, okay? That's how it is usually with politics. You got 1/3 of the people who care, 1/3 of the people who care about the other side, and another third who just want to live their lives. They got bills to pay, they got kids to raise, they got things to do, places to go, people to meet, business they got to handle up on. They don't have time to worry about politics, okay? They are content to let other people deal with it, okay? And especially in the world we live in that is busy, nonstop, full of distractions, and full of constant effort and strain that we have to do just to keep this baby running, without any kinks. It's understandable that some people would feel they don't have the time to care about politics. It's not that they're un-American, it's not that they're unpatriotic. They just feel personally that they have other concerns in their lives, like putting food on the table, that supersede political discussions, particularly on the internet, when the most they use it for is to organize family reunions, or to check the weather, I mean, not everyone is political internet savvy. But basically, in the end, she said, I was not being inflammatory. I don't feel like I was. If people are really that interested, I will post a link, in the description, or to anyone who asks, with a screenshot of the conversation. And they can decide if I was inflammatory, okay? I personally don't think I was. She, in the conversation, did not give off the air of someone that was offended. She was just asking, semi-loaded questions, but, And so I said, and in the event that person's watching, I'm not giving any names. If I post anything, names and pictures will be blocked out. I have no intention of airing anyone's dirty laundry. This story could be about anyone. And so, in the end, she said, and if you haven't been watching this and you know me in real life and you know who she is, please keep your mouth shut. Um, basically, for the good of just general peace and quiet, keep your mouth shut. Don't be a busybody. She said, well, if this is the way you believe them, you're gonna have to find another tutor. Which, I mean, okay, we have a veritable brigade of them at this campus. I'll go find another. No skin off my teeth. And it, on the basis though, it was one of those things that upset me, and I had to remember to think logically and rationally. I had to stop and look at it from her perspective. And I had to say, well, if the tables were flipped, I might have done the same thing sooner. Maybe not. Because, in generally, I'm not a discriminatory person. I mean, I believe in calling a spade, but, I like to think I judge people by their character and their actions, not by their orientation or their beliefs or anything. I mean, I can be totally cool with somebody who is, a Muslim or is, has different political beliefs than me. I can be totally cool with them, as long as they're, not an asshole. Uh, I remember one time I had this guy in a raiding guild who was an actual asshat, and would actually bother people incessantly. It wasn't a raiding guild, sorry, it was like a gaming clan, like just multiple games, Mountain Blade, other games, just, as a Steam group. And, he was actually gay, like he was gay. And, he was an asshat. He would troll people. He would start flame wars. He would start inflammatory discussions in the comment section. He would send people disgusting pictures, GIFs, really disgusting /B kind of things. And people said they didn't want to deal with that, and they just said, please don't, and nobody was ever an ass to him about him being gay. Like, I think him being gay, came up the one, when people we were talking about something like relationship related stuff or something like that, just shooting the shit, and, we asked him about, how's your dating life? He's like, oh, I'm gay, I have a boyfriend. I was like, oh, okay, so nobody really, he didn't really, he didn't care to talk about it much, except when people would chew him out for being an asshole. And then he would accuse people of being bigoted because they were gay. And it was just the most far-flung thing in the world that nobody knew how to respond to. Because, no, we're telling you why you're being an asshole. And, that's the one thing I hate, is when people, who legitimately don't know what they're doing or who are legitimately fucking things up and won't admit it, they hide behind some excuse like that. Oh, you're just prejudiced, I've had people do that jokingly, I had this black friend who liked to throw people off, whenever they do something like, oh, it's because I'm black, isn't it? He would even say this to black people, like, oh, it's because I'm black, isn't it? It was just one of these, it was just something really stupid, But people who are serious about it, and clearly no discrimination is involved, I'm just like, it just bugs me. I'm just very aggravated by, this whole setup, as you can probably tell. I mean, I'm not, it just concerns me that even more and more we're getting to this politically divisive point. And, as I sit here trying to articulate these arguments, because I feel like I get hammered from both ends. I mean, I have on one side, the craziest of liberals, who want to dissolve nation states and borders and everything under the sun, in the name of endless materialistic hedonism. And on one side, I have far-right authoritarians who want to burn everything down that isn't white and Christian and straight, damn the consequences, and, damn the, damn, practicality and, damn morals and all that good stuff, who have the most barbaric outlook on life that I think I've ever seen. And it's aggravating, particularly when I feel like I'm defending a religion that I feel like I'm defending a church that doesn't exist half the time, And I've kind of gotten over that hump that I had a few months back. I do believe in Catholicism, I do believe in the truths of the church and all that, but it's just, it's so endlessly aggravating to have to deal with this for a multitude of reasons. The least of which is not, I hear people all the time, day in and day out, talk of action, talk of, action this, action that, you know, uh, even people I don't necessarily disagree with, I have a problem because it never materializes in anything, I mean, I don't have a problem with the Remnant anymore. I read their articles with a lot more regularity. I have a problem with some of the things they say, some of it is incredibly historically illiterate, as it is with a lot of radical traditionals. It's awfully historically illiterate, and and I have a very old video somewhere on my website talking about that, where I go through, talking about this one thing where they were talking about these, these monarchs who opposed popes or did this or that and the other, and I, corrected them on it. And I literally found all this out from a Google search. I went online, and, I mean, okay, the deposition of a pope is a big political event in history, okay? Like, the deposition of any state leader is. If that, especially at the hands of a foreign power, if it happened, it would be like the first thing in, like, the summary of that pontiff's or that person's, Wikipedia or their biography. It would be like, oh, deposed by so-and-so in this year, and one of only a few to have had that happen, or something like that. It would be very, very simple. So not only that, but when I increasingly hear these people talk about action, and I wait and I follow and I listen, but I hear no call to arms. I see no public demonstrations. I see no action. I see nothing that is in any way, shape, or form resembling, action. I see a lot of talking. I don't see anyone actually doing anything. And that's endlessly frustrating. That's, endlessly aggravating. Because I would actually like to do something, sir. And it's one of those things where, I had someone who was with the American Chestertonian Society, who was a speaker for distributism, say that, point out something that I've always said. Conservatives have a real problem with outreach. They have a real problem with getting a cohesive, unified platform. And then you have progressives who are conscious of the fact that their ideas are totally new and know they have to make converts and know they have to deal with political, intellectual opponents, and don't have a problem doing that. Conservatives seem to really struggle with this. And it's why we've been losing slowly, I think, pretty much since Waterloo. Like, if you want to look at the left and the right in a grand political scheme, which I honestly hate the monikers, and I really don't identify with either. I take a middle position, the Catholic position. And, I just observe and I learn from the failures and successes of these two groups, both of whom have elements I can agree with. And, I very much, I notice these things, and I agree. Like, yeah, conservatives have a big problem with outreach, progressives don't. And recently with this gay Indiana, this gay law in Indiana or whatever, I watched a video that was linked in an article talking about when gay rights activists stormed, the cathedral back when John O'Connor, I think, was Cardinal of New York, and they stormed St. Patrick's during a high mass and had a sit-in. And this was something I told people to do back when they were going to have that black mass in the Civic Center. I said, get in there, interrupt it, sit in there, refuse to leave until the host is returned. Refuse to leave or until the event is canceled. I mean, I would settle for the host being returned. But if they will cancel the event, that would be even better. Refuse to leave. Do something. Make yourselves an immovable wall that they cannot ignore. Because, I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to have some police rough you up, arrest you, and throw you out. They're not going to send you to a frickin' death camp. They're not going to. I severely doubt they would line you up against a wall and shoot you all. I mean, if you're really that cowardly and you want to worry about those potentialities, I told people that's what we should do, But did anyone listen? No, nobody listened, This I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty sure lots of people who like the NSIR went to the event in Oklahoma to protest. I'm pretty sure there were lots of them that went. I can't make a confirmation on that, but you know, it's something to consider. That and I was watching in this video, there was this person who was a figure in the gay movement who said that you know a big reason why now all these businesses and all these groups and everyone listen to us is because we get out in the streets and we refuse to not be heard. We refuse to not be silenced. We refuse to be silenced. And I say, yeah, that's what Catholics need to do. You need to refuse to be put in a corner. You need to refuse to be not taken seriously. I mean, I'm not saying let's go. I mean, if it comes to violence, fine. Okay, I am willing to take that as far as it will go. But I would avoid that, and I would not want to be the one to start it without a really damn good reason, and there are a multitude of variables on that, if you throw any hypotheticals out there, I'm probably not even going to bother to answer them because, hard cases make bad law, you can't judge everything based off of the one possible outcome. You have to judge for the larger outcome, the more possible likely outcome. And, it's just a problem that I notice over and over and over again. And it's just an issue that I just never cease to be bothered by and never cease to notice. And on subject of things I notice about traditionalists and other things, everybody in the world now has noticed that Pope Francis is taking the church in a new direction. I used to buy into the whole thing that, the media is having a larger conspiracy to turn the pontiff against us. And I realized that's about as ridiculous as insinuating that Jews control everything, okay? Do you ever think that these news outlets are just reporting what they see? Perception is reality, They see a pope who acts differently, talks differently, walks differently, behaves absolutely differently than any pope before in history. They're going to say something new is happening because something new is happening. I could squirm out of a trad on this subject that Pope Francis is doing something different, that he is revolutionary. Not in a good way, but he is doing something new. So, yeah. And yet, no one wants to do anything about it. No one wants to say, I dread totally and absolutely the idea of forcing with arms the Pope to change anything. I dread that with my utmost, absolute, complete, total being. No, I will not do it. I will not be privy to it. If the Pope, if you want to do that, that motherfucker better fire on us first, because otherwise I will have no part in it. Because we spent a good 300 years trying to get the Pope out of the control of political factions in Italy, the patrician families. And I will be damned if we go back to having to deal with that shit, with, the Medici and, the Crescenti, finagling their way into the papacy. And I'm not totally against a political pontiff, I'm not. But I'm against the idea of the papacy being controlled by outside forces whose interests are not that of Christendom or the Catholic world. They're of themselves. That is what I'm against. That is what I'm against utterly and absolutely. So, but at the same time, you deal with this larger issue of a pope that, we clearly can't follow, a council we clearly can't accept, reforms that we cannot sit by and allow to happen. Look, people, if any of the popes after Vatican II didn't like or didn't want things that were going on, they could change it. Collegiality be damned, they could at least set an example that could not be ignored. They could say things that could not be ignored. They could make, they could make their voices known on the subject, but they haven't. They've gone along with it. They've accepted it. They've gone with the flow. They haven't made waves. They've just accepted that this is the direction they want Catholicism to go in, and it's one that I can't and a lot of other Catholics can't accept because, quite frankly, it's not the religion we joined. And that's the thing I was really angry about before I made this video. 30 minutes in, yeah, I'm getting to the point, I guess, but made a lot of good points otherwise. But that's one of the things I was really upset about. When I became Catholic, and I wanted to become Catholic, my priest said, I was pretty much independent by this point. I had a car, I had my own money, and I was making my own money. I was working. I was in high school still, though. But I was getting my independence by the time I was becoming Catholic. I had finally got my driver's license, and I was driving. And my priest said, hey, how about we do lunch? I'll buy. And I said, that's great. Sure, thanks. And he said, yeah, it'll give you a chance to talk to me. I can hear your story about why you want to do this, and I can kind of guide you further. And I said, sure, that's awesome. And so we went to this local place, and we sat down for a nice meal, and we talked. And he asked me about my journey, and I told him pretty much the story, that you've probably all heard or read at some point on my site. And I told him what I believed in. Without knowing it, I was a very traditionalist Catholic. Without knowing it, I was very conservative in terms of, I guess, what beliefs should be. I was believing the old doctrines and morals and dogma, and believing so, acting so. And I didn't even fully understand the Second Vatican Council. I didn't fully understand why the Mass was in the vernacular so much. I didn't fully understand why some things were the way that I didn't think they were. I mean, I had no contact with Catholics really, and I just fully didn't understand after having made the journey to try to convert why things were the way they were with the Second Vatican Council, I didn't fully understand it. Whenever I brought it up, he said, well, you'll learn more about that as time goes on. I said, yeah, because I was in confirmation, RCIA, whatever, trying to become Catholic. And, it just infuriated me after a while. It angered me. It made me so mad after a few months into being officially Catholic, going to Mass regularly, to hear this guy basically indirectly denounce everything that I told him I believed that was Catholicism, and he sat there and nodded his head and didn't listen to me. I was literally a guy in a suit with a nice car who wanted to become Catholic, and I guess I would look good, becoming a Catholic, I wasn't, my family weren't exactly nobodies where I lived. I guess I've phrased it Southern aristocracy. These old families that just have natural respect, and people tend to know them wherever you go or know their kids, and so that's kind of how it was for me growing up. My parents were well connected in the community, and I didn't even know they knew where I was sometimes. Like, I didn't even know they knew what I was doing. I didn't know that they had eyes on me that much, and so I was, I guess it just looked nice to them to have me become Catholic and go to their parish regularly and assist at Mass and just donate and put money in the collection plate. It just, and be one of 5 people, who showed up to Mass dressed like they were going to see the Lord of the universe, and the other 4 being half a century older than me, and it was just really aggravating after a while to realize, and I got this really insane feeling I'd been hoodwinked, like I've been in a setup before, and this feels an awful lot like one. And that feeling really motivated me a while back when I was doubting Catholicism, that, I told this guy who I was and what I believed, and he didn't care. He didn't seem to be bothered by it. So I sat down and I said, well, hey, something somewhere has gone wrong. And becoming Recognize and Resist, the Pope that decreed, in papal infallibility, supposedly when questioned by one of the opposition about, well, what happens if a pope preaches heresy? His response was apparently, well, you don't follow him. Okay, self-explanatory enough. So that's what I do. These popes teach heresy. I don't listen to them. I have nothing to do with them. I don't keep their likenesses in my home. Their names stay out of my prayers unless it's for their conversion. And when I refer to them by their real names because, quite frankly, I don't see the genuineness in their office. If Pope Francis is this great guy who likes to call people and cares about his flock, he can call me up and he can politely explain it to me, and I am totally open to, fly my little Irish butt to Rome. I am totally okay for sitting down for dinner. I am totally fine with it as long as they'll have me, and if my immortal soul matters that much to him, well, I guess he can make an impression and he can do something about it. Otherwise, I don't think I really will care much to change my opinion, because I've read everything there is to read on this subject. I don't think there's a lot you can read on the subject of what to do when you have an unprecedented situation in Catholic history. There's only so much you can do. So that's pretty much what I deal with. And when I just look at all this stuff, with all the things that go with the Pope, this and the Pope does that, I'm not surprised anymore. I mean, my Rubicon event was when he said to a room full of schismatics, we should scrape off apologetics, we should scrape off, competition, And let me explain exactly to you why that's bullshit, because a lot of people didn't seem to get it. So what you're telling me is we should scrap Augustine, Aquinas, Dominic, John of the Cross, Francis de Sales, all these people, Ignatius of Loyola, we should totally forget their contributions to the religion, which were made with polemical arguments and witty discourses, like that's a bad thing, like intellectual discussion is somehow anathema on a subject that is a science, that is a philosophy, as if discourse and debate that is passionate should be excluded from the academic sphere, because apparently subjects that pertain to the immortal salvation and well-being of the human race aren't worth raising your damn voice over. I call bullshit, okay? That's what I do on that subject. I call bullshit. So, a lot of the whole, that pretty much sums up how I feel about the situation, that really, that these people don't matter? You really expect, and listen, what I posted, I have actually posted on Tumblr, but I'll include it in the description below if I can find the original post. I will post the link from the Vatican website, the English translation given out by the Vatican press office, that has been put on the website in the archives for posterity and for historical sake. I will post it. You can read it yourself, and you can tell me what you think it means. And you better slap a theological degree or a philosophical degree up there with it, buddy, because otherwise I don't think your opinion really means much on the subject, because that seems like pretty plain English to me. I know he doesn't speak English, but that even in English translated document, those are not hard sentences to read. I think I could hand that to a fourth grader, and be like, okay, what does Pope Francis think? He thinks we shouldn't try to convert people. I'm pretty sure if I handed that without context to a room full of fifth graders for a reading comprehension course and said, tell me what this means, they would tell me what the author thinks. Tell me what and I'm not talking those fifth graders that won't talk to you. I'm not talking the kind that don't voice their opinion. I'm talking a room full of people who will talk to you. If I ask them, what does this paragraph mean? Now, the preface to this, I suppose, is that it would have to be an untainted gene pool, like an untainted pool, I guess. They could not be Catholic. They couldn't be neocons, and they couldn't, not neo-conciliarists, neo-Catholics, who would obviously be biased. But, if I just told them with an anonymous, not telling them who it's written by, what does this author think? What does this passage mean? that we shouldn't try to convert people. I promise you that's the response I would get. I promise you that's the response I would get. I'm tempted to try that actually now. I'm tempted to somehow sub for a classroom, give out a reading comprehension assignment on this sermon, and say, tell me what this means. Tell me what he's saying. Tell me what he says. I promise you, 9 classrooms, at least, if not more, 7 classrooms out of 10 would tell me the Pope doesn't think the writer does not think we should try to convert people. I'm pretty sure that's what I would get. I'm reasonably confident in that. And I've endlessly, come to understand, how, certain factions have been treated. I still have very mixed feelings about Marshal Lefebvre, but in the society, at least it's fascist elements. But, the fact of the matter is the Vatican Commission that went to Econe totally lied to him when they reviewed the seminary. They totally did not tell him their actual opinions. They told him it was nice and they wanted more of it, and they go to Rome and tell Pope John Paul II something totally different. Karl Wojtyla, they tell him something totally different. And by the way, I don't care how much people like him. I'm going to say it. He is a disgrace to Polish Catholicism. He's a disgrace to Polish people. And he has shamed every single soldier of Mother Polonia, Mater Polonia, who died on the fields of battle against the Ottoman scourge when he kissed a Koran. He literally took a piss on their graves. All of them. From John Sobieski on down and up. Everywhere. He just totally pissed on all their contributions to the protection of Catholicism. He just defied every he desecrated every martyr, shamed them, because their descendant, the only Polish pope in history, and that's the kind of guy we got. The only Polish pope in history, and that's the one we get. Really. We get one that, the great, irony of it all could have been spared if he had not kissed a Koran. That honestly, that would have been his one redeeming quality, it would have been something I didn't even have to think about, I shudder to think at the reaction that would occur if, a pope in a diplomatic envoy, in some kind of diplomatic discourse between the Ottomans was offered a Quran. I shudder to think at the implications, I shudder to think at the reaction of Christendom if, particularly in the midst of the Protestant revolt, if he had taken up the Quran and kissed it. I shudder to think at the mere chaos that would have erupted, in a matter of months. I shudder to fathom it, If people want to talk about action, they really need to start doing it. But I'm pretty sure I've said it in almost every video I've ever made, every talk I've ever given. But Blessed Charlemagne, the man who did what almost every European politician, excluding the Romans, every European has been trying to do since, unified Europe under a single cause and a single crown in a universal monarchy. At least Western Europe, if you want to really get specific, Western and Central Europe. Okay. Unified them. One of the only quotes of his that has survived is this: right action is better than right knowledge. If we want to do what is right, we must know what is right. That was my senior quote for graduation. I have used that quote endlessly throughout my life since I read it, and I believe it's extremely important to Catholics, and it's extremely important to how we're supposed to look at our situation. We need to come up with a plan. We need to start putting into action our principles. We need to get together. We need to figure out what we believe. We need to figure out what we think. We need to figure out what we're going to do, because this is no time to joke, people. Connecting it to us about, people talking about the Gaystapo earlier. I think that's a bit inflammatory and unnecessary, but, if we're really getting to the point where, and I consider it partially our fault because of how wrong I think our approach has been. If that it wasn't clear when I talked about civil marriage and all that, how wrong our approach was to begin with, the coming, telling us that we have to condone and accept something that's against our religion. I mean, people who may have not cared either way, they just follow their religious dictates and beliefs without harassing anybody about it, are going to be forced to do homage, over to do homage to these powers that be who want this to be done a certain way. I strongly believe that Catholics need to, we need to scrape off these freaking heretics, schismatics, these people who lead churches and are members of churches that when they go home, when they go to their churches, at some point in their lives, they're going to hear an anti-Catholic sermon, and they're all going to applaud, and they're going to clap, and they're going to cheer, and they're going to shout, amen, brother, they're going to shout, hallelujah, they're going to be okay with it, they're going to be fine with it because that's what they believe. I think we need to scrape them off. We need to disconnect ourselves with them, shun ourselves from them, get back to our own dioceses and our parishes, and we need to clean house. We need to sort our own shit out. Traditionalists especially need to figure out who we're going to rally behind, what we're going to do. A big reason I'm despairing right now is I have no Mass. I live in a largely Catholic area. This is a pretty Catholic part of central Louisiana. And I have no Mass. I've been to some of the Masses around here. They're modernist shill, garbage. I don't want to deal with that spiritual pollution. I don't want to listen to it. I don't want to be privy to it. Even most of the traditional Masses I've seen around here, are connected to the diocese in some way. And so I know they're never going to talk about the problems that need to be talked about. They're never going to bring up, the things related to the Pope or, Dolan or anybody like that. They're never going to talk about that because, the bishopric and, the clergy are all a tight-knit club. They all look out for each other, They don't, generally speaking, they look out for each other, So, to me personally, I think that, it's important that we need to start thinking about, what are we going to do for clergy? What are we going to do for our spiritual needs? Who can we look to? Who can we trust? Who is doctrinally orthodox? Who is traditional without being over the board crazy? How are we going to organize? All this other stuff. This is what we need to do because time is running out. And, my worst fear is this is all going to pop off and people like me are going to be stuck in the middle. And I probably won't choose either side because people call it being unrealistic. I call it having standards. Okay? I call it not being stuck in, not being trapped in narrow definitions that don't define me. I call it not allowing myself to be told what I believe. I have had so many people, I've lost good friends because of it, because I guess you call someone something enough times, they believe it, That's the only way I can jokingly kind of make it all, even though it's all very serious, Friends I've lost to Nazism and fascism, particularly some of my more German-inclined friends, who are traditional conservatives, And, they got called Nazis and fascists and all this other stuff that they denied being, until one day they just started accepting it. They started working it. They started living it. And I just didn't know. I didn't know what to do, It's so painful to lose close friends over things like that. People who used to help you and made you feel a little more hopeful about what you were doing. And then they go off and help the people that you were standing in opposition to side by side at one point. And that's just really, that's really jarring, that's really shocking in any kind of profession or any kind of field to have friends just leave you like that. And it really sucked, particularly, it just, there's nothing else to say to it really without getting too depressing. It just sucks to lose really good friends that way. I guess really that's all I have to say because we're in a really bad situation. And I am sick to the gills of people, saying they want to, do something about it, go to rise to action, and they don't. They don't do anything. They don't go out in the streets. They don't hold presentations. They don't hold demonstrations. They don't do anything that would necessitate visible action and change. They hold conferences and prayer breakfasts and run their little websites, which is why, I still accuse certain editorials of profiting off of our current situation, because all they do is get people to buy their newsletters and things that just continue to explain in detail the situation, what we're going through, but they don't serve as a rallying point. They don't circulate information. They don't logistically organize things. They don't actually do anything. They literally do nothing. Their solution is to keep talking about it. And that, to me, is aggravating. Particularly when to sell newspapers and to have cheap clickbait, you keep saying things about calls to action, calls to arms, all this other garbage, because even though you're not actually doing that, you're just parroting the same points. You're telling the joke without getting to the punchline. And I'm sick of it. And in my opinion, if we're not going to change anything else about this movement, about this situation we're in, about the things we're dealing with, that is what has to be changed.